One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Concili Incorporated is Nevada's premier Democratic campaign firm, fighting for progressive issues and candidates for over a decade, and proud sponsor of Battleborn Progress. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Concili Inc., Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt, as well as our episode sponsors, Save Lives Nevada and Washoe Education Association.
Out in Front. I'm obviously not Annette Magnus. I'm Will Bregman, the Communications Director here at Battleborn Progress, filling in. Annette wanted to be with you tonight, but unfortunately, she has come down a bit sick, and we wanted to take this moment at the top of the show to remind everybody to remember to get their vaccine, their booster shot, which are now available, and to remember to continue to wear your masks. We've seen the effects of COVID with this latest variant, especially spreading like wildfire all over our community, and we want to make sure that everybody stays safe. And we are thankful that Annette has been such a champion on COVID vaccines and getting people vaccinated, because while it does suck to be sick, it is a lot better than being in a hospital on a ventilator. I can tell you that much right now. And it's also a good reminder that in spite of being vaccinated, that it's also very important that you all continue to wear your masks, wear the correct masks, either N95s or KN95s. You can find them at Home Depot, Lowe's, different places like that, so that you remain protected and that you continue to distance, practice good hygiene, wash your hands, all of that stuff, because even when you're vaccinated, you're still at risk of catching the virus. But it is still beneficial to be vaccinated because, of course, you experience much, much milder symptoms. So with that out of the way, and without any further ado, I wanted to welcome you all to Out in Front, second episode of 2022. We're all excited. We're all happy to be here. I wanted to remind everybody who's watching tonight, please share, like, subscribe, ring that bell, become a Patreon, whatever. We really appreciate all the eyeballs on our program getting out to all the folks tonight. So please, if you like what you see, feel free to give us a like and give us a share. Other important reminder at the top too is we will be taking your questions in chat as always. So go down there in the chat, leave your questions, leave your comments. I want to hear from you. I want to chat with you. We're going to have a good conversation tonight all about what will hopefully be Nevada's next and newest national monument, Avi Kwa Ame. And I want to be part of the conversation. I want to have a conversation with you all. So please, questions, comments in the chat. We love to hear from you. So we've got a panel of 3 guests tonight, and we're going to introduce them in just a second. But we first up have Taylor Patterson. She's the executive director over at Native Voters Alliance Nevada. You've seen her on the program before. She's a friend of the show. Taylor, welcome, and just start out and introduce yourself.
Of course, I do love that I have been officially become friend of the show, because I love everything you guys do at Battleborn Progress and on Out in Front. But as Will said, I'm Taylor Patterson. I'm the executive director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada and a member of the Bishop Paiute tribe.
Excellent. And then next guest I want to introduce really quick is Berta Gutierrez with the Conservation Lands Foundation. Berta, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Hi, Will. Thank you for having me. And my name is Berta Gutierrez. I'm based in Las Vegas, and I am the Associate Program Director with Conservation Lands Foundation. And I'm working with the coalition to honor Avi Kwa Ame as a national monument.
Fantastic. We're going to get into that tonight for sure. And last, have Craig Bakurjian, did I say that correctly? With the Nevada Conservation League running the Honor Avi Kwa Ame campaign. Go ahead and introduce yourself and who you are.
Hey everyone, my name is Craig Bakurjian. I'm, like Will said, the campaign manager for the Honor Avi Kwa Ame campaign. Just helping all of our coalition partners accomplish this great task and bring a new national monument to our state of Nevada.
Terrific. And all 3 of these folks have been working. I've been working with them all the past 2 weeks to put on a great event we're having actually tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. at the Springs Preserve in Las Vegas, but we're going to live stream it from our sister page on Protect Nevada, which is a Facebook page. It'll also be on YouTube on the Institute for Progressive Nevada YouTube page. So you'll be able to tune in there virtually from home, and you'll be able to hear from leaders like Congresswoman Dina Titus and Clark County Commissioner Mike Naft, who'll be talking about some of the efforts underway right now to get Avi Kwa Ame established as a national monument. But tonight we're going to go through a little preview about what's Avi Kwa Ame all about. And so you folks at home can learn a little bit about the campaign and why this is such a crucial thing to do at this moment in time. So my first question, let's dive right in. I want to talk to Taylor. To start off, what does the name of Avi Kwa Ame mean, and where is this area in Southern Nevada?
Sure. So Avi Kwa Ame, at the simplest translation, is the Mojave words for Spirit Mountain. So Spirit Mountain is essentially the point of creation for the Mojave people. It's where their creation story begins, also where their life cycle and all of those stories end. So it's really just a significant place for the Mojave people. And that's why the national monument, the proposed national monument's name takes its name from that Mojave phrase, I guess you could say. But it's also sacred to a lot of tribes in the southwestern area. So it's not just the Mojave people that get their creation story from Avi Kwa Ame. It's also about 10 to 12 other human-speaking tribes as well. So there's a giant range of southwestern tribes that see this as their point of creation. We also have the Chemehuevi and other Southern Paiute tribes that have this as a part of their traditional Salt Song Trail. So that is also another place where it has a lot of cultural significance, where we see a lot of sacred medicines and a lot of sort of stories and oral traditions about the life cycle of the Southern Paiute people as well. So this was a big, giant cultural corridor that was home to so many of our Indigenous people here in Southern Nevada. And so to get a little bit more specific, since a lot of the tribes' boundaries are kind of all over Nevada, California, and Arizona, this proposed national monument would take place basically in between Searchlight and Laughlin to the very south of Las Vegas. So we're talking about the very, very tip of Southern Nevada, but it begs the question of like why that particular area, and I just will go into it super quickly because I know Craig and Berta can offer a ton of information about that. But what we have is this idea of Avi Kwa Ame is in California, and it's in Nevada, and it's in Arizona for the Mojave people. And so really what we see though is in California and Arizona, we have a lot of land protections that are on either side of the Nevada border. And so there kind of ended up being this little donut hole that lacked protection around the exact Spirit Mountain area. And so this proposed national monument would close that little donut hole and finally give some real protection to that area.
I feel like you're angling for a co-sponsorship from Assemblyman Steve Yeager there, mentioning it as a donut hole. But yes, I appreciate that description. Berta, I want to come to you next. So as Taylor referenced, this has been something that's been talked about for a little while. What's been the history of folks advocating for the Avi Kwa Ame monument, and how did that originate?
Thanks, Will. Well, the people have been looking for protections, and specifically the Fort Mojave tribe has been working to get protections. One for the most important, their most sacred place, which is Spirit Mountain, and that started in the 90s. And that's where we start seeing the fruits of their advocacy. We see in 1999 how Spirit Mountain is recognized as a traditional cultural property and is placed in the National Register of Historic Places. So that's one of the wins. Then we see in 2002 how Spirit Mountain Wilderness is created. So there is this history of trying to get protections for their most sacred area. Now, while the mountain is their most sacred place, they moved and they lived around the area that we are trying to protect. And while Spirit Mountain itself is not part of the monument, it's at the easternmost boundary of it, all of that area is their lands, and they don't live there anymore, and they don't own them, but they continue to care for the land and to steward it. So the Fort Mojave tribe and other tribes as well have been fighting different large energy development that have come up proposals that have come up in the areas where there's currently no protection, which is in the Nevada side. That's why this monument would offer that missing protection that that Taylor was mentioning.
Yeah, and I want to focus on that just as like a quick follow-up too, because we know that some areas around where the monument would be do have some level of protection, but you're saying that making it a monument strengthens that protection?
Correct. Right now, there are two levels of protections in the area, and there's a couple of wilderness areas: the South McCullough Wilderness and the Witham Joshua Tree Wilderness. And there's also an area of critical environmental concern that covers a lot of the monument proposal, but not all of it. That specific land is set aside for tortoise habitat. So because it has a protection that is specific to tortoise habitat, the funding is limited and the management is limited to that, so there's no management for recreation. There's no management for cultural sites or cultural inventories. There's no management for any other type of uses or any other type of animals. So because of that, we see some of the higher points that have beautiful Joshua Tree forest and it has bighorn habitat. They're not protected because they don't overlap with the tortoise habitat protection that currently exists. So in these areas that have been left out without protection, that's where we're seeing projects come up that tribes and conservation groups and local residents have been fighting for every time that they come up.
Interesting. So I want to go to Craig now. So Craig, you've been at the head of this coalition that we've been part of to make Avi Kwa Ame the next national monument. Tell me about this campaign and who's all part of this coalition that we're putting together for this movement.
Yeah, our coalition is very diverse. There's 18, unique organizations that have joined on in our effort to protect Avi Kwa Ame. But again, really the center, kind of the voices, indigenous voices having been calling for protection for Avi Kwa Ame, as long as they have, that was kind of the beginning of work to protect the area. Just again acknowledging the hard fights that they've been keeping up throughout this process. But in addition, our coalition has been very diverse, very broad. There's been outdoor business and recreation leaders joining. We have folks from the International Dark Skies participating, recognizing the value in protecting not just the land, but the sky itself, that again, in every aspect of Avi Kwa Ame is unique and beautiful and worth fighting for and protecting.
Terrific. Taylor, I want to go back to you real quick. So you talked about this a little bit in your explanation of where Avi Kwa Ame is at. What's the importance of this to tribes that are in the region?
So like I touched on a little bit earlier, we have sort of this, I keep calling it a cultural corridor. I'm not sure that that's a real thing, Will, but I'm making it a thing in regards to this proposed monument, because what we see is just so many different Southwestern tribes utilizing this space. Like we mentioned earlier, so for the Mojave people and for the Fort Mojave Indian tribe, who's really been spearheading this effort since the beginning, it's the point of creation. The Spirit Mountain Avi Kwa Ame is where all of their oral tradition says that their life cycle as Mojave people begin. And also we had a really great map that I think I had talked about it when it premiered, our story map that had been created really by Berta and some of the other folks at CLF, but a lot of the elders got to tell us more cultural insights to that piece of area as well. And also discussed a lot about how it's really essential to the end of their life cycle as well, in the process of they do traditional cremations, and how that's where their traditional cremations had taken place too at the very, very beginning. Since time immemorial, this has been their area of beginning and end. And so for the Mojave people, this area needs to be preserved, because without having that space, those cultural stories and traditions all die off. But also, you know, like I said, a lot of the other human speaking tribes share that same story of origin and creation. But our Southern Paiute people here that call like Las Vegas home, as well as, you know, we had several Paiute tribes that have signed letters of support for this particular national monument. They also share cultural significance in this area with the traditional Salt Song Trail. And so much like the Mojave people, those salt songs tell the story of the Paiute life cycle, where it begins and where it ends. And so for like the Chemehuevi Paiute, who are at the very, very south of sort of the California-Arizona border, they need to move through that space to get back to their point of creation here in the Spring Mountains, right next to Las Vegas. So we have a lot of people moving through that area, and a lot of sacred medicines and stories that take place in Avi Kwa Ame.
It's very interesting. So I get why right now has there been such a push, do you think, to get this area protected? Are we seeing more maybe threats of encroachment from industry or whatnot, or what's the spark? I mean, obviously we have a interior department that's a little more friendly, I guess, to this now than previous years, but is that kind of the push right now, or am I characterizing that right, or is it just something that's should have been done a long time ago that we're now just finally addressing?
I mean, I would say a lot of things that Indigenous people have been saying for a really long time have been put on the back burner. And I think we know that as now we're learning, like, hey, all this stuff that we as Indigenous people have been telling non-Indigenous people for, gosh, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4 centuries now has been true. And that's stuff about traditional burns and how to caretake the land and water. And so I think, you know, Fort Mojave Indian Tribe really had started this by saying, hey, this is a really culturally significant area for us. But then we started to see biologists and ecological people that are looking at this area and saying, wait a second, this is important for tortoises, this is important for Joshua trees and the mesquite trees and all of these different things that exist in that area. So I think it was the perfect storm of things building at one time. Of course, we'll say the administration is a lot friendlier to conservation, and of course the America the Beautiful initiative that President Biden had signed, trying to conserve 30% of land and waters by the year 2030, is also super helpful, because there's this concerted push for more land conservation and water conservation as well. So I think it was the perfect storm of everybody at once going, hey, this piece of land right here is actually really significant to our thing, whether that's outdoor enthusiasts or Indigenous people or larger national organizations like CLF and WCF and some of our partners.
That's really great. And I want to ask you too. So we've heard it, the Indigenous name, of course, Avi Kwa Ame. We hear it also referred to as Spirit Mountain, which is kind of the English name, I suppose. What's the significance of making sure that we call it Avi Kwa Ame and referencing it by that name?
I think it's just, you know, we need to honor the Indigenous people of this land and the First Peoples, and calling things by their appropriate name is the first step in doing things and doing that. Also, I think, like, on a broader scale, you know, we saw with AB 88 recently in the legislature, we have the state geographic naming board and things like that are now having to, like, undo names that are culturally insensitive and having these problems with names that are really inappropriate, incorrect. And we can avoid that by calling it the appropriate thing right at the very beginning, what it's been called for the Mojave people for tons and tons and tons of generations. So it's like, I would say, a step beyond land acknowledgement. I know land acknowledgements are very trendy right now, but also just calling things what they're called is very appropriate.
Well, recognizing Indigenous sovereignty over the land should not just be a trend. We should make it practice. But thank you for that answer. I want to go now back over to Berta. So Berta, if you could tell me, what does it actually mean, like the nuts and bolts? How do we designate an area like Avi Kwa Ame as a national monument? What's involved in that?
A national monument comes together either by Antiquities Act designation, which the president is able to designate it with a, he can put a declaration and designate it. He has that ability because of the Antiquities Act. Or you can go through Congress through a bill. So it's a special designation that has two different avenues of coming together. But it also comes with permanent protection for the area. That means that once it is designated as a monument, there's not going to be the need to have to fight different energy developments, because that area is not going to be available for that. It also comes with funding and different directives on management. As of right now, there's no funding for cultural inventories. There's no funding for trail signs, so people that seek to recreate in the area can know where they are. There's no funding for that because right now it's just set up for either the area of critical environmental concern areas or just open land under the Bureau of Land Management. So the designation comes with the protection, but with the funding for that management. And the management is also, that process has a lot of public input. So there's a lot of ways that people can, really contribute to how the place is going to be managed. So we're excited about it, and we think that this is the right way to do it. There has been this push for a national monument came after, in 2018, there was the last rejection of a large scale wind proposal that was in the area. And at that point, it's like, okay, we're going to continue fighting project after project. And this is we, as in the tribes, this is the conservation organizations, this is the locals. It's like, what is the right solution? What is the right solution for this area? And that's how we came up with a national monument proposal.
That's great. And so you sort of touched on this, but once it's designated as a national monument, what changes in terms of how use of the land is determined? What agencies of the federal government step in to start managing it? How do they share that with tribes? How does that all work?
So right now, the landscape is managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and we think that the national government would continue to fall under the management of the Bureau of Land Management, but with a different directive, right? So right now, we know that it is for conservation of habitat, and it is for to protect the cultural values of the area. So once that's in place, first of all, there's going to be a big celebration that we're going to be part of. And then there's a process that starts with the managing agency to create a what's called an RMP, a resource management plan. And that's where, the input from the tribes comes in, and the input from the local residents, and, just like public, more public input comes in. That's where you go and see, okay, what are the values of this area? Where is it okay to put a trail? Where is it that we need to protect certain cultural sites. So all of that work and all of that inventory comes after the designation, right after the party.
We certainly don't want to miss that. Thank you so much, Berta. I want to go to Craig now. So Craig, I know that we've talked a little, we've touched on the indigenous cultural piece. We've talked a little bit about the biodiversity importance and environmental importance of the area and some of the natural resources. So what about outdoor recreation? It's a huge industry here in Nevada. It's become very significant due to the pandemic, people wanting to go outside and have nothing else to do. So tell me about the outdoor recreation opportunity that Avi Kwa Ame would afford. Can people visit this area now? And will people still be able to visit the area if and when it becomes a national monument?
Absolutely. Folks can totally visit the area now. I'm actually going camping in the proposed monument site this weekend. I'm really looking forward to that. To get outdoors and, to spend some time, in the area that we're talking about. If you do choose to visit the monument, there are some very cool, unique opportunities within the boundaries. There's the Weethrump Joshua Tree Preserve, which actually houses the largest Joshua tree in the state of Nevada. It's really cool, to kind of see something that's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years and keep growing. So that's like a really cool opportunity. If you're a back road enjoyer, or you have a vehicle that can handle some uneven terrain, there's opportunities to hit the back roads in the Paiute El Dorado Valley AZEC and the Southern McClellan Wilderness areas. We do ask though that folks who do choose to participate in those activities stay on the established roads and trails. As we talked about a little bit earlier, there's that desert tortoise habitats, and beyond that, even just the undisturbed soil itself is just very important and unique. So just treating the area with respect. If you're not so much of an outdoorsy adventuring type, there's opportunities to visit Walking Box Ranch, which is an architectural beauty. It's a Southern Spanish colonial architects. If that's the kind of thing that you're into, it's definitely worth checking out. And again, just the hiking up there, if you go up like Christmas Tree Pass, you can hike up and look down into Lake Mead. And that's just, again, a unique opportunity that you kind of don't really get anywhere else in the state. To look down and see Lake Mead just open up beneath you. It's beautiful and kind of beyond words. And I hope that folks take the opportunity to get outdoors in the pandemic, to get away from people and stress of all that and enjoy the area. And then to answer the second part of your question there of when the monument's created, we absolutely want people to continue to use the space. One of the goals of our monument proposal is to keep the existing roads open, so that again, folks who enjoy the back roading still have that opportunity within the proposed monument once it has been established.
I just need to say, I feel like Craig is underselling the Weethrump Wilderness area. I don't think people that maybe live in Las Vegas or Reno and have seen a Joshua tree, but don't really understand these Joshua trees grow so slowly, tiny bits year by year by year. So these giant Joshua trees that are taller than my 6'5" husband, they take forever to grow, and just seeing them in their full beauty is insane. And I don't think you really realize how long and how majestic these things are that are out in the desert really are until you go out there and take a look. And really just being able to preserve those and not have them all chopped down to create a solar field or a wind field or anything like that. So definitely, I highly recommend those Joshua trees. So I have to double down on what Craig said for that.
I'm gonna add.
Yeah, go ahead, Berta.
Put my
Triple
2
down.
cents. So on the website where you can sign the petition to support the National Monument designation, which is honoravikwame.org or honorspiritmountain.org. If you're like, oh, how do I spell it right? Like honorspiritmountain.org. You can sign the petition there, but there's also different tours that we have put together. So if you want to go visit the Newberry Mountains, or if you want to get close to the Castle Mountains, or if you want to go to the New York Mountains, Alan O'Neill, who spent a lot of time in the area, not only when he was still superintendent of Lake Mead, but now I feel like I see him every time I go there. Even if I go by myself, I'm like, I think that's Alan behind me on the road. He has put together a lot of routes for people to visit. And there's also warnings, right? Like, oh, if you want to go here, you're going to need a high clearance vehicle. So, I know where I want to go, if I'm taking my little Toyota Corolla, like I know where to go and where not to go. So those are helpful. And you can find those at honorspiritmountain.org.
Which I know is important because if I am not mistaken, I believe Team Battleborn Progress had gotten stuck out at Gold Butte at one point as well. So it's important to know where to go and where not to go. I'm calling Annette out even though she's sick at home.
That's perfect. We appreciate that. And yeah, and honorspiritmountain.org is the website where you can go. You can check out some great images on there. You can sign the petition. You can do all sorts of stuff. And also just another reminder, if you like what you're seeing, like, share, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, whatever platform you're on. Make sure you get the word out because this is a really important campaign and we really want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to see what a beautiful place Avi Kwa Ame is. And Craig, like he said, you're going out there, so take some good pictures. And I'm sure if you follow the Honor Avi Kwa Ame Facebook and Twitter page, you might see some of those popping up in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out for that as well. I'm going to turn now to, if I didn't lose my place, back to Taylor. Sorry. I wanted to ask you, so how do we make sure that we're really following the tribe's lead when we're talking about all of these designations for protections of outdoor spaces? This is something that is important, of course, to the tribes, but how do we make sure that they're the ones at the center of it?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult because there's this, I guess, legal burden for tribal consultation for the federal government, the state government, down to local jurisdictions, because our federally recognized tribes are their own sovereign governments. And so there is a legal aspect to that consultation and making sure that the federal government is respectful in certain areas that they have ancestral ties in or on their land directly. But I think there's a bigger piece of this of just being respectful, period, and going beyond the legal consultation and into really meaningful engagement. And now that can mean a lot of different things, and it can be a little bit difficult because, like I said, with this particular area, and I think it's a lot of this way for many areas, is you have dozens of tribes that have called certain areas home. And so we've been really lucky, like I think all of us have basically shouted out and alluded to. The Fort Mojave Indian Tribe has been so hands-on during this process and has been so engaged in the National Monument building, whether that be in the boundaries or in some of the events that we hold, and just really offering their perspective and their thoughts on the area. But it's about going beyond just the Fort Mojave Indian Tribe and into some of those other tribes that we talked about also having called that area home. And that includes like our Moapa Band of Indians, our Las Vegas Paiute tribe, the Chemehuevi Indian tribe, who all also really, more, I don't want to say more directly, but also called that area home, I guess, more recently, we'll say. And so it's really just good old fashioned, like reaching out to people and talking to the tribes, and also making sure there's respectful engagement as far as this is a full on sovereign government. You can't just like talk to one tribal member and think that you've done a good job in creating tribal engagement. There has to be kind of this top down engagement from the tribe, and that's engaging with tribal council, engaging with their cultural programs, and making sure that they really have a say so in what's happening in this project. And I think for others that are out there trying to get a national monument made, I don't know how, like, what a weird niche group of people that may be, but you really have to look and say, hey, does the indigenous people of this area even want a national monument? Is that something that they're even interested in? Because it may just be like, hey, we're good with the wilderness protection, we're good with this, or you know what, we actually want like a big solar farm. That could be the possibility for some tribes. And so making sure that whatever designation you're going after is matching the tribal concerns in the area is really important. And then that goes on into the stage that we're not even at yet of creating these management plans and making sure that whatever level of engagement the tribe wants to have with managing these lands is included in that plan. And for some tribes, that might be being very hands-on in the management, and some might just be like, hey, if you find an artifact, let us know. And so it really is just meeting each tribe where they are and making sure that you're acting with the full gravity that this is a whole sovereign government. They don't owe you anything. And if anything, you need to, in like the simplest terms, come correct. If that makes sense, Will.
It absolutely does. Berta did a hand motion like this to illustrate that in a visual metaphor. So thank you for that, Berta. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I actually have a follow-up for you on that, Taylor. So I know that but it's been about a year now. We've had Secretary Deb Haaland leading up the Interior, maybe like 10 months. And we've seen some efforts under her lead to, I think, include more tribal voices in the Interior Department's work, which is something that I think has been pushed for a long time. Is a year on, what do you say, or do you think that there's been more of a difference in how this administration and this Interior Department versus past interiors have handled issues of tribal sovereignty? That one's kind of a curveball, not specific to this monument, but you just thought of it while you were talking.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember it had to have been about a year ago that I sat on this very show with a bunch of my friends, and I said to Annette, Annette, Native Americans can be corporate shills too. So I'll withhold my right to say anything until we're like further into this. And I think that's the struggle with being the first of anything, right? I mean, we saw that during the Obama years with being, the first Black president. We're seeing it now with Secretary Haaland being the first Native American lead for the Interior. And so I think it's a really difficult line to kind of toe, where this is a historic role that she's taking on. She also works for a president that's very moderate, and has done a lot of really good things on conservation, but also is still really trying to balance a lot of the energy and development needs. And so it's, I think, a tough position for her to be in. I think the attitude is, of course, 100% better than during the Trump years. And I think they're looking for that engagement and really looking at what they're doing with the America the Beautiful initiative, that 30 by 30 kind of goal and resolution. It shows that they're hungry for that tribal engagement at the administration level, whether that be in the Department of the Interior or up in the Biden administration. But I always want to see more. I want to see more engagement with our tribes. I want her to be able to really step into that role and really make sure that all of our tribal governments are being heard on all of the issues. And so I think it's still, I'm going to say, too early to tell. I'm happier than I was under like other previous department secretaries, but that's my like very measured stance. And I just will say that I am so glad not to be the first of anything, because that is a role that I think is too big to take on.
Will,
I appreciate you dealing with my my ambush gotcha question. Thank you very much.
Always.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's something, just to add to that, I think that's something like tribal engagement is something that we need to demand from everybody, right? Like, doesn't matter who is at the lead. And that is from the bottom, like, or regional BLM, district director, or, from like the person that's, whatever level we need to demand that from them. And so that's my 2 cents. Like, it doesn't matter who's at the top, we need to make sure that we're doing better.
Well, and I think that's the trouble too, is like we have this expectation, and I guess that's where I was saying I don't think Deb Holland is a corporate shill. I'll be very clear about that. But I do think that we had this expectation of, now that we have a Native in charge, everything's going to be 100% different. And that's where I wanted to like walk that back and be like, hey, she still works for Joe Biden, who has done some really good things, but also is a very moderate president. And that's what we were, I think, as a country kind of looking for after the Trump years. So it's just this measured thing of like Berta saying, hey, everybody should be engaging tribal leadership. It shouldn't be Secretary Holland job. And I think, as like Berta, I'm sure can speak to, like, we put women of color in that position all the time to be like, you're the woman of color in the room. Now hurry up and bring us up to date from the last like 50 years of issues. So
No, it's a really great perspective, and that's why I wanted to discuss that, because I think that's a really important consideration to have. Berta, since we were just talking, I'm going to come to you next, and I wanted to ask you, so should this not go through, should we not be able to protect Avi Kwa Ame, what is the consequence of that? What could happen should this monument to be not come to fruition?
I think that the monument proposal and the monument designation is just going to bring good things. So if it doesn't happen, we're going to continue to have to protect the area, like project by project, right? That we're going to have to continue engaging if there's a proposal for wind that is not appropriate, if there's a proposal for solar that is not appropriate. We're going to have to engage project by project. And that's something that it doesn't, like, the tribes that have been getting involved, they don't have that much capacity for that, right? So this is where a national monument is going to like kind of like ease that burden on them and on everybody else that continues to fight projects where they're inappropriate.
Yeah, so we really want to make sure that this gets done. It should hopefully not create there shouldn't be too many roadblocks to doing this, but we know it is a process, and you've detailed for that for us beautifully. So thank you for that. Craig, I'm going to go to you. I want to ask you, this will be our last question before we take some chat questions. So thank you all for being patient. And if you do have any questions or you just thought of some, remember, in the chat below, we'd love to talk to you and chat with you about your thoughts. So Craig, how do people get involved in the campaign to honor Avi Kwa Ame?
As Bertha mentioned a bit earlier, the best thing to do right now is to go to our website, honorofikwame.org, honorspiritmountain.org, and sign the petition right at the top. The petition really does make an impact. It shows our elected officials that support for Avi Kwa Ame is popular and the right thing to do. We know that as much as we want this to happen, it won't happen unless our legislators choose to make an effort to engage with this. And your signing the petition is just another push towards letting them know just how important that is. In addition, you're always welcome to join us on social media. Our handle is the same as our website, Honor Avi Kwa Ame, on all platforms. And the last thing I'm going to plug is our live stream of our press conference with Congresswoman Dina Titus and Commissioner Michael Knapp tomorrow at 10:30, which you can watch on the Protect Nevada Facebook page, and I believe here on YouTube as well. Right, Will?
It'll be on our Institute for Progressive Nevada YouTube channel, which is slightly different YouTube channel, but we'll make sure that both links are in the chat for everybody so that you can bookmark that and be there tomorrow at 10:30 to watch live as our elected leaders, tribal leaders, community folks are going to be making some statements and making the case for why Avi Kwa Ame should be our next national monument here in Nevada. So thanks for that, Craig. So now we're going to move to some questions from you all in the chat. So I'm going to start actually with one from Steve Horner, another friend of the show, longtime supporter. Hi, Steve. And he asked a really good question, actually, which is, even with the designations we saw with Bears Ears and other national monuments shrunk, I almost said skunk, monument shrunk and open for mining, how can we protect the lands? And so I wanted to make a point here. So for those who maybe don't know the history, under the Trump administration, it was Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, I believe, were the two. I think there might have been others, though, that were national monuments that saw their boundaries shrunk by the Interior Department in order to make way for oil and gas industry interest, essentially. And so I think what Steve's getting at here is, in spite of some of the oil and gas interest creeping in, and we've since restored those boundaries, but of course it's still an ongoing threat to our public lands. What do we do to make sure to protect Avi Kwa Ame specifically from any kind of like oil and gas leasing or interest?
Well, I can take that. The National Monument designation is permanent protection. And the move by the Trump administration of reducing the monuments, and it was 3 monuments, it was illegal. So there was a lawsuit that went up against that because we saw that as an illegal move. So we see like national monuments are permanent protections. They cannot be undone. So that is the best way to honor Avi Kwa Ame, to really provide that permanent protection through either an Antiquities Act designation or through a bill.
Great. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Sounds good to me. I have a question here from Maite, which is, will this designation help small communities that are nearby in any way? I think, Craig, you might want to weigh
I'll
in.
hop in there. So the monument proposal is actually supported by our 3 gateway communities, Searchlight, Laughlin, and Boulder City. The reason why those communities support the monument proposal is because they believe it will bring, increase in outdoor recreation, which, especially given the, current state of the pandemic, we know is an important sector of Nevada's economy, and just kind of increase, visibility and opportunity in, kind of the places that, maybe have been overlooked, by other opportunities here in the state. So, the smaller towns in the area do support the monument, and, we believe that it'll bring economic opportunities, it'll bring, just visibility, and it's something that is, again, popular and requested by, folks who don't want to live next to a development or a wind farm or any of that. They want to keep the character of their rural communities, and the monument both does that and, brings increased opportunities.
And I think that speaks to just how much diverse support the proposed monument has. I don't know how familiar like the out in front viewers are with like some of these rural areas like Searchlight and Laughlin, but it's extraordinarily tough to get them to support anything that could be seen as like government overreach, should we say. And we have, as you know, Will, like this fierce libertarian streak here in the state of Nevada of just like any government thing, we don't want it, we don't need it. And so the coalition that has supported this, all of those small local governments that Craig was talking about, the conservation groups, the outdoor business groups, all of these groups that all can sit down, and tribal governments too, that can sit down and say, hey, this is something that will work for all of us. I just think is amazing. And I can't claim to have put together any of that because I've very much done a lot of the tribal organizing. But I think it's such a testament to my coalition members that have put together such a diverse group of support. So that I don't think can be understated enough, is just like even our rural communities realize that this is going to be a really strong thing for them to be a part of these, what they call gateway communities for the National Monument.
Yeah, we certainly do have a libertarian streak, and we want to say no government until it's time to, I don't know, deal with a public health crisis, or let's just say, for example, and then it's like, why don't we have any revenue? Well, there you go. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move to a question now from Paulette, and this is relevant to today, actually. What is the likelihood that Congress will make the monument a designation, and will it require a simple majority, or will it require 60 votes? In other words, will Manchin and Cinema destroy our dreams for this too?
I don't, oh, Berta, you can go ahead. But what I was going to say is I did see an earlier question as well about like, which route is better, whether is it the legislation, is it the Antiquities Act? And I think we've seen so many of our dreams destroyed by Congress, like in the last year or so. And so that's why I'm such a big fan of the Antiquities Act designation, because I just
Or
am
just
like,
the day, like
yeah, yeah, even
yeah.
the day, the moment, Joe Manchin, I was hoping was gonna be like visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, but unfortunately they didn't come through this Christmas. But I think that's why I personally tend to be a bigger fan of the Antiquities Act, because the Biden administration can just be like, hey, this has met all of the Antiquities Act needs, and can go ahead and do that. And we don't have to worry about things getting tied up in Congress. But we have had a lot of really great recent talks with Congresswoman Dina Titus, who I think is going to be introducing some legislation. But Berta, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So Congresswoman Dina Titus is going to be introducing legislation to protect Avi Kwa Ame, which she sent a letter today. Y'all should go and look at her tweet and like it and say thank you. And one of the important parts of having a piece of legislation is that there's more room in there to put language towards the values that we want, why the monument is being established. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't go through. If there's a piece of legislation there somewhere that the agency can look back and say, okay, there's a little more information here on how we need to manage these lands. And it shows the support of our delegation, that's what we want, right? And that's what they should be doing. They should be looking out for Nevada and what lands to protect here. Nevada has so much public lands that is going to be a key state to be able for the U.S. to reach the goal of 30 by 30, of protecting 30% of lands and water. Like Nevada, there's so many public lands in Nevada that we had to push for more protections in the state. So we want that process too, and we welcome it and we celebrate it, and we want that support from our elected officials, from the Nevada delegation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, come on, POTUS, you can knock out like 5-10% of that right here in Nevada. Just come protect our stuff. Appreciate that answer. Thank you so much. And speaking of that, I had a question from our usual host, Annette, which is that where do elected officials stand on this monument, specifically our congressional delegation members? Does anyone know? I mean, obviously we just talked about Titus. Can anyone speak to the other members?
So this week, both Congresswoman Susie Lee and Dina Titus have released letters of support for Avi Kwa Ame. The monument proposal itself lives within both of their districts. Stephen Horsford's district doesn't touch the monument, and Mark Amade's up north doesn't. But we're very excited to have the support of both Susie Lee and Dina Titus, with Congresswoman Titus tomorrow, announcing her, decision to introduce legislation, and really get the ball rolling on protecting Avikwame. And again, we're just always excited to talk to our elected officials and as the coalition, do everything we can to keep these conversations front of mind for folks. And that's what we're going to continue to do with our delegation from Nevada.
I'm also very excited that on the more local level, that tomorrow during that press conference, we also have Clark County Commissioner Mike Naft, who's going to be also announcing his own resolution as well. Doesn't want to be overshadowed by Congresswoman Titus. So we will be hopefully having that resolution at the Clark County level as well, supporting the National Monument. And so I think we've really been able to engage leaders on kind of all levels. And Craig and Berta had talked about earlier some of the super local chambers of commerce and the Boulder City Council. I got all mixed up with what their full title is, but the Boulder City Council is what I would call it, had shown their support as well. And so we've got county commissioners, we've got Congress people, and now we just also we would love to hear from our two senators as well publicly, their support for the monument. And so hopefully this will become just a full federal delegation wide piece of legislation.
Let me add to that. So this is an opportunity for the audience right now. Like, how can you get involved? You can contact our senators, and you can contact our congressional members that haven't weighed in yet and say, hey, I am excited about this proposal, and I am excited for Avi Kwa Ame to be a national monument and to be Nevada's fourth national monument. And you're like, I am so excited. When are you going to express your public support? And that's one way to also support this campaign.
Yeah, and that'd be a perfect little action for everybody to do right now. If you have a Twitter account, they really love it when you tweet at them, is, at them on Twitter, at Sen Cortez Masto, at Sen Jackie Rosen, at Sen, or at Honor Avi Kwa Ame, which is the campaign. You can ask them, hey, senators, I would love for you to show your support for this monument campaign. And you can link the website right there with the petition and tag the campaign and use the hashtag as well, Honor Avi Kwa Ame. And that'll help bring more attention to this issue. The folks, the wonderful staff at those offices look at that stuff. And so it can help raise awareness and hopefully see some positive support out there around getting the word out about making Avi Kwa Ame our next national monument here in Nevada. All right, well, folks, it's top of the hour at 6 o'clock. Thank you, all of you, for a great show. I'll give you each the last word in a second, but I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. Remember, again, you can like and share our show. It helps us reach more people and helps us get out in front of more eyeballs, more visibility. And my last thing before we go to our guests, give you the final word, would just be, like I said, stay safe, stay inside, don't travel, don't go out and see people if you don't have to right now. This latest Rona variant is very serious. So please stay inside. If you haven't already, get vaccinated and get your booster shot. The booster is important. A lot of people forget that. And so I'm going to go in reverse order. So Craig, what's your final word to leave our viewers with for tonight?
I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I always love getting a chance to talk about Avi Kwa Ame, and to remind folks about the live stream of our press conference tomorrow with Michael Naft and Dina Titus at 10:30 at Protect Nevada's Facebook page. I hope to see you there too.
We hope to see you there virtually. Don't actually show up, please. Next for Berta.
Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate everybody that joined us tonight. And all of the actions that you're going to take, all the tweets that you're going to send, and sharing the petition with your friends and family. This is going to be good for all of us in Nevada and everybody that visits Nevada as well. It's going to be good for the Nevada economy, and it's going to be good for us to start like really upholding the commitments to tribes. So I'm really excited to be part of this movement, and I am excited that you all are here and are part of this movement as well.
And Taylor Patterson, take us out. Your final word for the folks at home.
Yeah, my final word will be, I think, a little more like Jerry Springer's final thoughts than my other two colleagues here. So I'll just leave it at like, listen to Indigenous people. We've been trying to tell y'all for a few centuries now. I watched Don't Look Up on Netflix, and I thought the only thing that could have made this more realistic was if Indigenous people had been telling them that that comet was coming for 100 years before that. So listen to your Indigenous leaders, everybody. And thank you, of course, to my favorite Thursday night show.
You're very welcome. All right, folks, that's our show. We'll see you next week, where hopefully Annette will be back, but if not, it'll be one of us filling in again. And we'll have a lot more to discuss at that time, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, folks.